advertise it as one? I don't think she did. We don't even have an agenda.
Has been doing long.
Mayor, you good?
It's online, but it's not a formal meeting.
Right.
You can still do what you need to do.
All right, we'll call this meeting to order. It's a town hall meeting. You're free to come address us. We just ask you if you come to one of the two X's, state your name, and so they can hear you on the YouTube and see your face if you'd like to talk. Anything you want to start off with, Russell?
Yeah, I've got some preliminary information with regards to revisions that have been made to the special event permitting process. Wanted to try to delineate between special events, assemblies, parade permits, kind of the process, and open it up for dialogue to see if there are public suggestions that the city council may want to take into consideration. So I'll just kind of work from my list, and didn't print it off, but I got it on my phone here. So when we talk about special event, per the ordinance, a special event entails the selling of alcohol, but specifically means any organized activity, whether for profit or not, having its purpose in entertainment, recreation, and or education, which takes place on public property or takes place on private property but requires special public services such as use of parks, streets, right-of-ways, sidewalks, as well as events that take place in local business establishments that are outside of their normal course of business. And this is where alcohol is involved. So our alcohol ordinance is on the website, has a whole alcohol ordinance contained, somewhere therein is section 669, I believe. It talks about special event permits.
That's what you guys have copies of that. That's what that is.
Okay, y'all got copies of that. And I don't know if y'all are working off the revised copy or did y'all have blueprint on it?
Yeah, it's got blueprint.
Okay. All right, so 669, the license fee. This is a new provision that's actually being enacted due to state law. The state is changing the process for alcohol licensure to where everything has to be run through their portal. We're just getting up to speed on implementing that, but ultimately I think it's uploaded online. It's reviewed by the state, reviewed by the locality. Fees are still paid, I think, the same, but we're gonna work through that, and we're gonna have more administrative meetings, kind of like this, to provide more information once that portal gets up and running. Page 2 of that document, I believe, was some of the issue that arose, and that has to do with the permitting fee for special event. And when we say permitting fee, is kind of broken down into multiple facets. So originally, I believe it was $350, and then it went all the way up to $650, depending upon how many of the days of the event was going to be. You'll see there in red that within the entertainment district, there's a scaled fee from $75 to $350, and the intent of that was to give some administrative discretion to both the city manager and the chief of police, dependent upon the type of event and the necessary public resources that are required to hold it. Meaning, if we just block off a parking space or two and it's a couple hours event, that may be $75. Or if it's a full-scale event, like a concert where you got to block down 2 or 3 state routes for several hours and they got to have a bunch of police officers involved. But it was entailed to be meant to where we could scale it depending upon the type of activity that was going to happen. In addition, there's a subsequent permit fee for holiday weekends. There's also under 670 a scaled provision for timing, and again, this would be built based upon the size of the event. Traditionally, it was we wanted the application for a special event permit 45 days prior to the event, but depending on what you want to do, we make and scale that back. Worst case scenario, I would say if you want to have a special event, try to get in ahead of 45 days. But if we're not closing down streets and we're not having to do traffic control for a whole bunch of people, we can probably work around that. 670 subsection B is an important factor, and this is where costs outside of the actual permit fee come into play. Is when public safety personnel have to be present for an event. Based on the plan that is submitted, it's going to be reviewed by my office and also the chief of police. And depending upon the event or the type of event, the chief in his sole discretion will have the authority to dictate how many public safety personnel need to be on site for the event. In addition to barricades, garbage cans, whatever. And I believe the way it is that half of that has to be paid up front, and then the remainder has to be paid 3 days prior to the event. So that is in addition to the permit fee. 10 days prior to the event, under normal circumstances, if it's large scale, we ask for a follow-up meeting with the person who's holding the permit. It's just to make sure everything's lined up for the event. One of the things that we didn't skim over that we probably need to bring up is alcohol. Of course, we're in the alcohol ordinance, so anytime alcohol is poured, how do you get an alcohol license for a special event? So any person that holds a valid alcohol pouring license in the city of Thomaston is eligible to apply for a catering stamp or add-on to their alcohol license. If you own a restaurant or you own a business and you have an alcohol pouring license, you can apply for a catering license, and then that would allow you to sell throughout the city as long as you meet the setback requirements. You can't pour right next to churches and housing authority properties and stuff like that. But otherwise, commercial zone property, then you would be eligible to do that. There's also a provision for certified nonprofit organizations who wish to do one-day events. There's a provision for nonprofits to apply for alcohol licenses under the catering section. Yes, sir.
You mentioned churches. What about businesses who don't want that alcohol sold next to their business?
There's no preclusion or regulation for sale next to businesses unless there's a specific allowance in the state statute that would dictate you can't. That can be changed by mayor and council. They have the discretion, but they have chosen based on this ordinance only to limit the sale of alcohol to those institutions which are precluded in the state law. And normally that's churches, housing authority, school property, I think DUI training centers, and there may be one or two others.
Since it's in your discretion, can't you go ahead and add businesses who might not want alcohol sold next to their business? It's in your discretion.
My discretion would be on the time frame for consideration of the application, discretion on the permit fee, and then the chief's discretion with regards to the number of police officers. Discretion from a regulatory standpoint as far as preclusions and inclusions of where you can have a particular type of commerce, that's going to be set by the governing body. I don't have that type of discretion, because then you would get into discriminate acts where if I denied somebody versus allowed somebody and you had similar type businesses but one wanted it and one didn't. But from a business class standpoint, the council could say, okay, funeral homes, we don't want alcohol sold within 100 foot of funeral homes, and then they could include that into the alcohol ordinance, and it would be a prohibition. Good question. So what we're trying to do is to create a permit to where we can have special events, where people can sell alcohol, and we have a fair and equitable process. And part of the conversation that we had with the city council is the permit fee is meant to defer some of the cost that is not traditionally part of the services we provide, meaning a special event held by a for-profit entity is using city resources for a for-profit entity. So there should be some consideration for covering that cost so that taxpayers don't have to subsidize that. Well, we also recognize within the central business district there is some economic benefit to the city of Thomaston and its citizens for having that type of activity, perhaps increase sales to the downtown businesses. So we decided it didn't necessarily need to be a one-for-one covering the cost. That's why the council agreed to give some administrative discretion within the entertainment district, depending upon the type of activity we were going to hold. So, does anybody have questions about special event permits or any suggestions that we could take under consideration, or if I could clarify anything?
Russell, I just wanted to tell you all thank you for your cooperation on our special event that we had last Friday. All of this was active, and we were happy to comply, and it went over great. So thank you all.
And thank you for that. And I'm always thinking worst case scenario, right, when we write these laws. So I envision a scenario where 8 of y'all all apply for a special event permit for the same time, the same day, in 4 different geographies of the city. Right? So that's something that we're going to have to balance, and ultimately it's probably going to be a first come, first serve if we get into a situation where we do not have the public resources to facilitate all the requests that we get. Another thing that I want to bring to the city council's attention, and also to our guests, and we had a meeting the other day where this was not brought up, and we can change it, but the way that the new zoning ordinance is drafted, and the new zoning ordinance is drafted, and we anticipate that it will go into effect on April the 5th, or next Tuesday, says that the retail sale of alcohol, whether it's a special event or whether it's a commercial entity, the retail sale of alcohol is only permissible in C1, C2, DT, and as a special use permit in a light industrial zone. Which means if the special event is submitted to be permitted in a residential district, based on your zoning ordinance, it would not be allowed. Just want to put that out there. Any more questions about special events? No? Well, I'm also prepared to talk a little bit about proposed changes to the alcohol ordinance with regards to Class O distilled spirit licensing. We've made some subtle changes. Again, the ordinance is on our website, and I'll very broadly try to describe the process that one would obtain a license to sell liquor at a package store. Again, we anticipate that the zoning ordinance will go into effect on April 5th. Following that, we anticipate that an ordinance to allow the licensing of liquor stores to go into effect. So if council votes that in, the process will follow this. So they'll vote within 25 days of the passage. We have to run notice in the legal organ of its passage. 35 days after it runs in the paper, we can start accepting applications. So I got to run it in the paper, 35 days has to pass, and then on the 35th day, they have an additional 14 days to get the application. So there's a 2-week period, but I can't take them. The earliest I can take them is 35 days from the time it runs in the legal organ, or 14 days after that. After the close of the application process, the city has 30 days to review those applications. After the 30-day review or sometime therein, we have to post on our website and notify all of the applicants 5 days prior to the drawing of a lottery. So we'll post it. Everybody who turns in an application will be notified 5 days prior to the drawing. It says that the drawing will be completely random at a system that I pick. We'll probably get clever with that, but it will be in public and truly random. So once you turn in your application for a package store license, it will be accompanied by a non-refundable $2,000 check. City will deposit that. We'll have the lottery. Some of the minimum requirements that are going to be in our ordinance pertaining to liquor stores, they will have to be in a C2 or general commercial zone. They have to be a minimum of 5,000 square feet. They will have to be contained in a standalone structure. It's a $500,000 minimum inventory, of which $25,000 can be malt beverage or wine. No lottery is allowed to be sold on site. They can sell tobacco or ancillary products that are associated with the sale of liquor, like mixers, your margarita mixes, that sort of stuff. All right, so those are some of the general qualifications. We've got some pretty stringent sign regulations in there as well. No advertisements from the interior of the building can be visible from the exterior of the building. We're not doing any neon signs or anything like that. All that's contained within the ordinance. All right, so at the day of the lottery, we've got 2 licenses that will be allowed by the ordinance that's proposed. Once they pull the first license, that will kind of set the pin drop, because based on the state law, liquor stores cannot be within 500 yards of one another. So if the second license is pulled and it's within 500 yards, that person will then be given an additional 60 days to find a secondary location. And if they fail to find a secondary location, then they will be forfeited. After we have offered the license to the respective person that submitted their application, their plans look good, we have to show where the building's going to be, its scale to any of the prohibited activities in the state law, like what's the proximity to churches and all this good stuff. We want to see facade renderings, elevations, kind of what it's going to look like as part of the application process. Within 7 days of the offering of the license, they're going to write their license fee check to the city of Thomaston. It's a $5,000 license fee for the check. After the license fee has been paid, they will be given a conditional license. They won't have a CO or be eligible to sell alcohol until we've done final inspection. They've been issued a certificate of occupancy. There will be an automatic renewal. Well, they'll have to apply for renewal, but it will be granted for an additional year, even if the CO has not been granted. If somebody's going to do a build-up structure, brand new site, may not meet the 22 deadline, so we're going to let them renew it for an additional year. If the certificate of occupancy has not been issued to the license holder by the end of 2023, then the license is forfeited. So that's kind of the process that's been laid out. Again, that's very broad terms. If you want the specifics, all of that is contained in the alcohol ordinance that's on the website. And hopefully April 5th, everything will roll through. We'll start our 25-day notice, and then we'll get it in the paper and start the process. Yes, ma'am.
What's the basic questions or anything on the application? What's involved in the application?
We have not developed it yet. So that'll be part of that 25-day process. Once it's approved, we will construct an application. And then once that 25 days is up, we'll make that available. We'll probably have it available before the end of the 25 days, but I would imagine a lot of the details that will be requested are already contained in the ordinance. We'll just put it in a little bit better form. Like if me and Jeff and JD are all part of an LLC, then neither one of us can be part of another LLC that makes application. Does that make sense? So there's some nuances that we're gonna put in that'll hopefully keep people from gaming the system to try to create, to prohibit increased chances at winning the lottery. So there'll be some legal definitions, who the formal applicant is, what the legal entity is, and all that good stuff. So we have a good idea how we'll lay it out, and as a good guideline, I would just look at anything that's pretty much spelled out in that Class O licensing procedure. There'll probably be a checkbox for it in the application. Yes, sir.
Could you repeat the square footage?
5,000 square feet.
5,000 square foot. And that location would not be in a neighborhood. It'll be
It's got to be in a C2 zone. And if you want to know where the C2 zones are, if you go to our website on the front page, click the most recent flavor of the proposed zoning map, and you can click on it and zoom in. But it's predominantly, not specifically, but predominantly the 19 corridor, north and south, and I believe a piece of the 36 corridor.
And if a person owns a building of this size, can they just go and apply to have this building or C2 without the public knowing?
No, so to have a property rezoned, you actually have to follow the state process, which means you would have to make application. There's about 10 questions you have to fill out. It has to go through the zoning commission. The zoning commission has to approve it. Then we have to have 2 public hearings on it where we have to post the property. It's ran in the paper. The general public's invited to come. And then after the 2 public hearings, an ordinance is drafted for the mayor and council, and they can either approve it, they can deny it, or they can approve it with specific conditions that they want placed upon it. So
What's the difference in a C2, and I hate C2 and business district?
all right, so the way that the proposed zoning ordinance is going to work is you have a DT district, which stands for downtown, and that is geographically and spatially the exact same thing as your historic district. All right, then you have a C1 district, which is supposed to be commercial neighborhood, which is kind of a transition between your downtown and your residential districts. And then you have a C2 district, which is your main commercial district. So C1 is supposed to draw upon neighborhood, less traffic. C2 is more commercialized, drive-through, what you think a typical commercial activity. So the thought was C2 because we don't really want a 5,000 square foot liquor store within close proximity to a single family detached or an R2. That was kind of the thought. And the other reason was we did not want to institute the package store license allowance until we had updated our zoning ordinance, because under the current zoning ordinance, a lot of the allowable uses in lesser zones are allowable in your most lenient zone. So you would pretty much have a hodgepodge of land use. So we wanted to tighten that down before we made this class license available.
Just play the devil advocate.
Mhm.
There's a liquor store. A person buy property and put a church.
So if the liquor store is established prior to the creation of the church, it would be a legal non-conforming use. And as long as they continue to abide by the law and continue to renew their license, then it would be fine. can't reverse condemn a piece of property that way. So there's all kind of vested rights and things that are involved with that process. It's a good question though.
So let's work with that first.
Yes. Y'all have any other questions about potential Class O licenses? You go unlock the door and let Ellen in. All right, do we need to talk about brown bagging? That's normally a typical question that we get a lot. So based on the past alcohol ordinance and the current alcohol ordinance, brown bagging is prohibited unless licensed. Which means if you have a commercial establishment, you cannot allow patrons to bring alcohol into your establishment, period. Can't brown bag. However, if you have a license to sell beer and you have a license to sell wine, then you can apply to have a brown bag license where patrons can bring alcohol into your facility. But in absence of having a license, it is against the law to allow patrons to bring alcohol into your establishment.
So you say you can apply for a brown bag license?
If you have a license to sell,
Okay.
yes.
Will there be an additional fee for that brown bag license?
Yes, it's a $250 add-on. So let's say you're a licensed establishment. If you're a licensed establishment and you don't really want to sell, but you want to let your patrons bring alcohol, you buy a pouring license, you buy a brown bagging license, your patrons can then bring their own alcohol to your facility. So there's a process for it, but in absence of license, you cannot brown bag alcohol. We always get that question.
Russell, if a restaurant serves wine, can somebody drinks half that bottle?
So there's a provision for sealing wine. Now, if you go to the new Longhorn and you order a bottle of wine and you only drink half and you want to take it home for you, there's a process that you can do that. There's regulations in the ordinance for how the establishments have to seal that and provide it to the patron before they exit the premises. There's also a provision where now if you call a restaurant and you want it to go beer or to go wine or to go liquor drink, there is a provision that we allow that now. Same process, it has to be sealed in a certain particular, you can only get so many per order, and all of those regulations are contained in the alcohol ordinance, but we do allow that. That was the COVID rule. I think the state kind of loosened the allowance, and we modified our ordinance to incorporate that. Questions? Everybody's good? Do y'all have any questions about anything that's not alcohol, since we haven't been here a long time?
Russell, I'm gonna bring up our long-standing debate about retail businesses hosting private shop and sips, where we invite our customers perhaps to have a small glass of wine or a tasting or a small sip of champagne while they're shopping. It's typically done throughout downtown in and around the holidays. And we've talked today amongst businesses on the square. We all want to continue offering that. What is the permit, or what is it?
I think it's called bottle house or wine tasting, or there's something to that effect, because my understanding is that a commercial entity cannot possess alcohol on site legally in the state of Georgia without a license.
We know this, or we think this?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it says it in the
So
ordinance.
what is the license? You're saying that that's a state license we have to hold to do shop and sip?
What do you, so what do you want to do? Let's start with there. So what do we
Well,
want to do?
I think it's one of those scenarios where, maybe we're talking about, maybe you guys are looking at it as a really broad thing. This is a very small, intimate gesture of hospitality, complimentary. It's to accent their shopping experience within that store. Commonly salons, you know, can tell ladies, hey, would you like a glass of wine while your color is setting? Or, you know, in our case, it's the holidays, and, you know, we've just got holiday sangria for Saturday. Very small portions, very,
The problem we get into regulating that is because it's a slippery slope between that and brown bagging. Because
But I'm
now
not-
I have a place that says, well, they didn't bring it, we just gave it to them. Which is a circumvention of the intent to prohibit brown bagging, where we're trying to get it licensed so that it can be regulated. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, or that we can't find a way to get there.
I think that's all we're asking for, is a way to get there. We all agree that we enjoy sponsoring those type events.
Casinos came up with that logic, by the way.
Well, and we want to continue that. I mean, I think all of us like that aspect of being able to offer that, especially now with all the progression downtown. We've got the entertainment district. We're supporting each other in these things. We would like, I think, our customers, and we want to continue doing that, but we also want to comply. We don't want to feel like we're not opposed to a permit. We're not opposed to a small permit fee. We're not opposed to applying for it. We're not opposed to any rules, and certainly can respect any regulations that you deem necessary. We just don't want to get to a place where we feel like we can't offer that. It's happening all over small towns just like ours that are in the revitalization process. Shop and Sip has been going on for a long, long time. I'd hate to see that our ordinance be so strict that we lose our ability to be unique within our private businesses.
And Lane, you're kind of talking about an occasional thing, like on the 20th of December, we're gonna have a sale, and in that sale, we're gonna have the Christmas sangria or whatever like that. So you're not talking about, you know, it's just an occasional event here and there.
It's no different than offering them a glass of punch, you know, and, you know, we serve that and lemonade in the summertime. Sometimes it just happens to have alcohol. It's just an attraction, you know, it's a draw, and our customers like to celebrate with us. Last Friday night proved that, and so we
So let
want
me
to.
ask, so would you buy it from a wholesaler that pays excise tax, or would you buy it from Walmart?
We just buy, I mean, anywhere. I mean, I don't know that it necessarily had thought about where it needs to come from. We buy it and give it away. It's no charge to the customer. And it's certainly not something that we keep a large supply on a daily basis. It's just a perk to offer to come in that day.
I do know you can't charge somebody to come in if you give it away.
And we wouldn't do that.
I'm not opposed to it.
For example, to coincide with the Sip and Stroll that the city is, we're all very much looking forward to that event taking place. An example we've all tossed around is, you know, it's an art and wine pair very well together. You know, we'd love to do a cheese and wine table inside the store, just as hospitality. You stroll in, we've got this available to offer. You know, it's not a huge elaborate, big spread. It's just a nice touch to coincide with an event that you're already hosting. At the holidays, we all work in kind of concert with each other. Lily Jane will have a little champagne. Tyann might do something, different. It's just an extension of hospitality that we're all already in the business of doing. So we just want to try to see if we can do that and comply.
How would you ensure
Would that be section you're looking for?
kind of that does cover wine tasting? So there's a wine tasting license. But the giving away outside of some licensure, what would be the regulatory control over if alcohol is provided to a minor? If you have a license, I can revoke your license.
We card it our events. I know who my customers are.
No, but there's no regulation on it if you give it away because you're not bound by any law.
I'm not going to serve anybody underage. I'm on the line for that. It's not happening.
Well, you could charge her with contributing to the delinquency. That's the punishment.
John, you said that there is something in the ordinance about a
It's
wine
an ancillary
tasting
wine tasting license.
And I don't even really call it a wine tasting. It would be more of just complimentary offerings.
The language in that, though, is if you already have another type of license, right?
Yes.
In the alcohol ordinance, I
haven't read
think
it.
the way they're
It may be.
written, and I probably haven't read the most recent version, but it looked like on all of the different, like the Bottle House and all those, it looked like you had to have some type of other alcohol license to have one of those. She doesn't have an alcohol license. Lily Jane doesn't have, and they're not mandated to have one with the business they have. And it's probably been 2 years now since I read the whole Georgia code on alcohol. At that point, I didn't see anything in there that said a commercial establishment, I mean, she owns her own business, she can have a bottle of alcohol in her store. And there's no prohibition for her giving it away. And of course, it's a big issue in lots of small towns. And when I was looking at it at that point, I mean, some towns were just saying it's illegal, but they couldn't tell you why it was. But their stance was gonna be, this is illegal. And I really, at that point, didn't find anything that said it was. But
I think it's a slippery slope because for every two that do right, you got two that do wrong.
And I think, and
And they want to circumvent the process of getting an alcohol license. So there's some charge built in for the service that makes up for the provision of alcohol. And we just have to figure through how to make that work.
So could we tie it back into something with the amount of events that are offered? Like say if, Rescue Me decides we want to do 5 of these events throughout the year, and then we set a price based on the amount of events offered.
I'm not opposed to it. I mean, common sense would tell you if you give away alcohol for free a lot, that's probably that's not good for your bottom line, right? So it needs to be, so it's built into the business model somewhere.
I mean, in particular, within the entertainment district, because that's the whole intent of this, is to provide this entertainment district that's, and we want to be on the same page. We want to provide an environment that's conducive for small business growth and provide this venue that people want to come down and enjoy downtown Thomaston. So we do want to work with our businesses, and we want to make sure that we are flexible and we're here to assist you, and that you don't feel like the city's here to stop you from doing what you want to do, because that is not the case in no way, shape, or form. That's the point of this.
We'll look at it. Good questions. What else?
I had something, Lane and I were kind of talking earlier, when it comes to maybe food trucks, in downtown. We have several food trucks throughout the community. Obviously we're not trying to diminish or take away from the business of some of our downtown restaurants, but we have food trucks that offer things that aren't necessarily available in downtown Thomaston. Right now, if we want to have food trucks, say, set up in front of Rescue Me, that's taking away parking spots. From my understanding, they're going to have to apply for a special event permit just to have that food truck there, which would be $75, correct?
Yes.
Because it's taking away, it's right-of-way access.
I think it's like $250.
Yeah. So, I think, if we're going to, again, create this environment in downtown Thomaston, it's going to be this environment for entertainment and destinations, trying to, whether we establish something where we have a city-sponsored food truck night, once a month or something like that, or again, figure out some kind of permitting system where we work with our local businesses, downtown businesses that want to host food trucks, and there's a small fee, that they will pay, rather than that big $250 fee just to have a food truck for one day in front of their business. And whether we tie that back into the discretion of the, the city manager, police chief, based off the size of the event, because I think with you guys, with your event, English was out there and it worked great. And she did well and she was very excited, and I think you guys would love to have her come back and set up, but that, if it's $250 every time that they have a food truck.
No, it's for the year.
Okay.
Not for the food truck, we're talking about two different things. Special event, $75. So for her to park out front of my business and occupy a single parking spot, $75. $250 is where we were talking about.
No, for you to be a transient vendor in Thomaston, you're supposed to buy $200.
That's Alicia's fee, that's not on me.
Yeah, no.
For me to allow Alicia to park in front of our store, $75 on me to be sort of her co-host.
Right.
Is how I see that.
Part of the special event.
Yes. And so if we wanted to do that on a once a month basis, I apply $75. She's already got her vendor permit.
Yeah, she's good for the year.
Yeah.
She's good for the year. But for her to come downtown, I think it's important to work with a local business and at least, I wouldn't want to see a bunch of food trucks just taking up parking places unless they had a co-host in a relationship like I might be with English's Cafe or any other. Maybe it's, the Picky Park food truck, or maybe it's another one. We would do it as a joint event special for that afternoon or whatever. I could see that being popular.
Yeah. And again, offering, something that's not typically offered in downtown Thomaston. That's another way to, hey, it might even be a thing where you have a food truck that comes in and realizes, wow, this is an opportunity for me to maybe even look at having a full-scale business restaurant in downtown Thomaston because we did so well. And they would never know that if we didn't have that environment for them to come into downtown Thomaston and even attempt to do so. So I think that's something we need to look at as well.
But Wayne, I don't think you're talking about doing like somebody hosting a food truck every week. You're talking about, again, on an isolated, like 5 or 6 times a year or something like that.
Or even like a first Friday or something.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
We discussed, with me being over more than just city events, I can't dedicate so much time to trying to plan these city events. So trying to create this environment, establish an environment in downtown Thomaston that's conducive where I can just help cross-promote the events. Gives me more time to push the revitalization, push the rehabilitation of downtown businesses, push the, drawing in new businesses into downtown Thomaston. So I think it's very important that we go ahead and address this now, because moving forward, that, we establish this environment and I can really focus on the rehab and the reinvestment and revitalization of downtown Thomaston. Because I'll tell you, it's coming. I mean, it's here from personal experience. I'm meeting with people. You see it. I'm meeting with people all the time on either people interested in buying buildings, people interested in opening businesses, and with the HGTV show set to air May 22nd. I expect a massive influx of visitors to downtown Thomaston. So we definitely need to go ahead
And I'll say too, our citizens want to be on the square. They want to come to town. They want to celebrate the city, and I think that's a sign that we're all doing something right, because that hasn't been the case for a long time. We were proud to see that. Friday night.
Has there been any discussion about a brewery and for breaking out?
There's been talks. There's been talks.
Are we ready for it?
About what?
Ordinance
A brewery.
So I think the way that our ordinance is drafted, and we have a license created for that we will not permit anything that will produce in excess of 10,000 barrels annually, which is about 3 times the size of a microbrewery. So we didn't want to write it to where like Coors Distillery wants to buy downtown, and you know, so there's a brewery and then there's
Michael
a brewery. So we're in the range of 10,000 barrels or less, which is a lot. And we've been approached by
Two so far.
Any other questions? Mr. Hughley, you missed the first part, so I wanted to illustrate one of the challenges.
Well, I missed it here, but I watched it online
Okay.
as I was driving down the highway, so
Did
I
you
heard
catch,
everything.
did you caught the zoning
I did.
piece? Okay. So we need to talk, and we need to talk with the council about that. Any other questions, non-alcohol? Downtown zoning question? No? Did I cover it all? Oh, bar licenses. Bar licenses have been removed. They're no longer allowed. Those have been rescinded.
And no one had even
No.
looked
No,
at it.
but our current alcohol ordinance, as long as your sales are 50% or more, you're good. So that could be food or any other items.
That last
So
meeting.
the way it
Huh?
works.
The last meeting we had.
We did.
It's to really give more time to look at that.
So, yeah, we can, and the thought was, we can always add them, but if one's issued and you create some sort of precedent, it may be hard to rein that in. So the standard has changed from 50% food sales as a prerequisite to hold a license, and now it's just 50% sales, excluding rent and lottery. So lottery and rent not included in the revenue stream to generate 50% sales. We'll tell you that probably on the renewal process, we will require validation for proof of 50%. So we will be checking that on renewal. Nothing. That's all I got. Thank y'all for coming.
Motion to adjourn, I guess.
Yes, sir.
I have a concern. I came tonight because I'm still concerned about how this dirt bike ramp got in our neighborhood. I've listened tonight, how you spoke about how C1, C2, DT works and how you advertise before things are put in neighborhoods on your website, how they put signs up, and we never saw that. And I do know the measurements in the city as far as when you set back on the road, adjacent properties, what need to be between. As I stated in the last meeting, I researched that back in 59, it was a residential. The property on Cedar Road. The city owned that property over the last summer because the city kept that property clean. Right after the city stopped keeping it clean, you sold it. And then it became a chip company or something. But anyway,
What property are we talking about? On Whittle?
yes.
So,
And
Whittle
the
Road?
city owns what on Whittle Road?
The city kept it clean, so I was under the impression that you owned it. It sits behind St. Mary.
No,
Okay.
we didn't own that.
Mm.
There was a question about the zoning. As
That's
far,
right.
far as I went back, the zoning certification map that I saw was in 2010, and it was commercially zoned in 2010. So I don't know when it got rezoned, if it was ever zoned residential, but it's as far as I went back.
And I did have Oasis to check that as far as it being residential and being changed to commercial zone. She went back as far as she could and she didn't find any place. She did call and talk to Gail, and Gail did not remember it being, residential and changed to C. But, and I understand the problem you're talking about as far as the dirt bikes and all down there. And Russell, you and I have talked to on several occasions about that. And you did tell me what it is can be done about it as far as being a nuisance, how to claim it as a nuisance, and that type. And I guess if it starts to happen, I don't know that it started down there yet, has it, Mr. Bent?
Well, I talked to some people at Macedonia,
Okay,
not Macedonia, I'm sorry, St. Mary.
okay,
And I understand one Sunday they had to turn up their PA system because they was out there riding again.
okay now.
And then I understand that a lot of people in the neighborhood have a problem with even their local police department, because if I'm playing music and have a yard party, you can come in my yard and say, turn down the music, or too many people is there, or it's too noisy. But when you go on this property, we can't do anything about it because it's private property. Well, my house is also private property.
And as far as, and we talked, and as far as looking at it as a nuisance, you
It is.
explained to me what it is, has to be done to
So you
To
have
declare it a
to,
nuisance.
so a public official, or I think it says 5 citizens, can make complaint, then you investigate it. Then you have to give them a cure period or an opportunity to stop. Then you have to write them a citation, then it has to go to court, and it has to be adjudicated.
Could you please tell me how it got there?
How what
Without
got,
it being properly advertised to be there. It had to go through code, city code.
if I go home right now and I get on my 4-wheeler, there ain't no permit that's gotta be done.
But this is not home. This is in front of our business, next to our churches. They're hauling in trash. They're not cutting trees there.
If he goes over there on a commercially zoned property and he turns on that wood chipper wide open, based on the way it's written, there's nothing I can do.
So
If it's an internal combustion engine and it's operating at the design specifications that it came from the manufacturer in a commercial zone, I don't have any prohibition on the book. Amplified music is different. It's got a volume control on it.
but it's just as loud as the volume control. And the police officer can come on my property and tell me to break up this part or to turn it down, or too many people on the property. But it's private property, but over here it's private. But you gonna tell me there's nothing you can do about it?
I'm telling you that the way the ordinance is drafted, there's nothing I can do about
Who wrote the ordinance?
it. We did.
So isn't this something that you can go back and rewrite?
How would you write it?
I mean, since it's a nuisance to the people in the neighborhood and to the businesses, you got dust everywhere.
So does a lawnmower, so does a
But
leaf blower, so
You
does a
got
chainsaw.
noise everywhere, when you got wakes at night, you got people in the neighborhood that works during the day or night, there's noise. You got people that trying to have church, there's noise. And then, I still haven't heard how it went from residential to C1. Because last I checked, there was no record of it.
I just checked the zoning
And it was
verification.
never advertised the way you spoke about how you all advertise on your website by sign. That was never advertised.
If But you're speaking about something that happened 20 or 30 years
You
ago.
know, I'm speaking of something that happened last year.
No, you're not.
Well, it wasn't over there until last year. And the
They-
city actually kept that property clean up to last year.
No, they didn't.
See, they never cleaned it
Well,
down.
The city has a sewer easement through there
Well,
that
I
we
think the
keep
guy,
clean.
I'm not gonna say the city, I'm gonna say the guys from Griffin, that come down and cut the grit, they're not, they from Griffin.
They're inmates.
The prison currently,
Yeah, the inmates from Griffin,
There's a sewer line that transects that.
that's correct.
And they'll keep the sewer right away, but the city doesn't own the property.
Look, I was under the impression because actually they were cutting the entire lot. Not just the easeway, they was cutting the entire lot
Well, if they were doing that, they shouldn't have been.
up until last summer. And that is the reason why I was under the impression that
I got
the
you.
city owned it, because you also cut this lot that is behind but beside the old funeral on High Tower, on Bethel. Which the same guys cut it. It did it anyway.
I get it. It's a frustrating situation. Help us figure out how to draft that, and I'll be more than happy to enforce it.
But I wouldn't know where to start. You the mastermind.
Well, that's what I've tried, but every time, I mean, you're talking about regulating land use or a combustion engine, which applies to chainsaws, lawnmowers. Lawnmowers cause dust, backhoes cause dust, bush hogs cause dust, skid steers cause dust. So you're now telling people they can't use commercial equipment on commercial property. So how do I write that?
Russell, one of the things you mentioned that I had somebody complain about a car in the neighborhood that's near him and it has a really loud motor and they're asking, what about that? I think you said.
If you have modified it
If
from, if it comes from the manufacturer and you modify it, then we can write a ticket.
But if it's not been altered from the way it was manufactured in the factory, then it's legal, right? But if you've modified it,
Unless it constitutes a nuisance, which is gonna be a subjective question. Because when he goes to court, if two of my neighbors are cutting their grass and my car gets dusty, what's the difference in that versus Jeff riding his motorcycle and my car gets dusty?
One's a recreational vehicle and one is not.
It's my
That's-
private property.
But I mean, you're talking about equipment that's, I'm trying to help this man out. One is maintaining the land and it's creating dust, that's one thing. And I don't know how you write one.
It's the same result.
Yeah. But one's recreational. I don't know. So that would be different.
What's the issue here? I don't, the lot is commercially zoned. Is that right? Okay, so the lot's commercially zoned. Is there a business being run on it that you can ride your motorcycle? Or is it just whoever owns it is over there riding their motorcycle on it?
That's what's
Owns
happening.
it is
So it
over
doesn't-
there.
I mean-
Charlie's over there.
I mean, it wouldn't matter if it was commercial or residential, they own it, they ride their motorcycle on it. Oh, okay.
And the way the current zoning works is C1 is all inclusive. So
Yeah.
whatever's allowable in R1 and R2 and R3 and R4 and R5 is allowable in C1.
So the only option for them is to go the nuisance route,
Right.
get enough people to complain to,
And
Mr. Bentley has indicated that that property used to be residential, and it was. From 1962 into 1979, I lived there, on that street with 15 other houses. So from 1979 up until some current date, it became commercial.
There's some residential properties over there right now that are zoned commercial.
And I did
On that
explain
street?
that.
Mm-hmm.
Explain that
street?
it felt, as
Really?
far as houses being on that street years.
And I can't comment as to
And folks live there.
when I asked the question, I verified through the clerk, I think she went back to 2010. And she said, well, here's the zoning certification from 2010, it was commercial. I was like, well, I mean, how far do you chase that? And now you're talking about, I mean, you could rezone it to what? Residential? Now you're telling people they can't ride four-wheelers on their own residential property.
And believe you me, I've talked about this.
It's an issue, and it's an issue worth addressing. I'm trying to brainstorm, you know, what's reasonable and it's not reasonable. If they're making a racket while you're trying to have church service or a funeral, you know, I get it. That's not acceptable. But how do I regulate that? It's tricky.
You would think, you wish that somebody who's got a four-wheeler and there's a funeral service going on in our church, you would wish they'd be considerate enough to say, I'm not gonna ride it during this time. I might ride it on Saturday afternoon, but if there's a funeral going on, you would hope they'd have enough courtesy not to do it.
Land disturbance.
So Russell, the procedure to determine something nuisance is you gotta have 5 people to say.
Or a public officer.
Public official, right. And I'm waiting to see what happens this summer. 'Cause like I said, I've talked to you, I don't know how many times about this. We've gone back and forth with it, and you explained to me what it could be done to.
But Russell, how do you determine?
And we could write it and it could be adjudicated. And I'm just playing devil's advocate.
The hard thing about is determine what is considered a nuisance. Because what if you have a neighbor that goes to work at 4 o'clock in the morning? And, I mean, how do you regulate that if you say, his car's too loud? And we got 5 people to say he's a nuisance. So what do you make him do? Park his car down the street?
It's up to the judge at that point.
That's the problem with all this is to figure out what you can and can't do on your own private property. If this is problematical, it's because it is next to a church and it's got a lot of things set up.
And then I think they started off saying that they were gonna be a chip something company. Well, they're hauling in trees and junk. It ain't like they are cutting down trees on this property. They are hauling in stuff and just pass by.
So the EPD rule is that you can bring in inert material and you can chip it, and 75% of what you chip has to be removed.
With EP, what?
EPD.
Environmental.
Okay, do they also say the square footage of land that you have to have it on? Because if you use the city setback, you probably wouldn't have enough room as wide as having this room. If you say, well, this is a company, or this is a corporation, or this is a business, then that business should be able to say, okay, they got to be allowed to do the setback rules.
So we don't allow buildings on a setback, right? So say you got a sewer easement. I mean, you can park your car on it, you just can't build anything on it.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out how can I get a business license without having a building on commercial property.
Have a physical location where you conduct a business.
I think the only business that is being conducted is riding dirt bike, which is getting on my nerves.
You always sue them in court. It's not a governmental legal issue, sue him civilly.
There are 2 residents on that street. And they complain, you know, as far as the dust and the settling on their cars and that kind of thing. There are 2 residents on the street. And I've I've talked to you every kind of way I could about this to see if there's something the city can do about it. We did last year. We went through this last year, and I can understand Mr. Minter saying we don't want to have to go through it this year. But I mean, you know, I think that declare, you know, file claim as a nuisance, file it as a nuisance, then
Well, I just thought that
that's what we
this
have
is
to
the
do.
venue to bring our concern and not go to court. I thought the city perhaps would have the power then to go to court.
I tried to ask that in every way I could. I've been, believe you me, I have. I understand the frustration of the people that live on the street.
I mean, just ask yourself, will you want it in your neighborhood next to your house? And your answer would be no, and then you're in a position to do something about it. So, put your feet in my shoe and say, let me do something about it.
I can't create an arbitrary rule on the book to enforce. I mean, I'd be more than glad to bring the solicitor in to talk to y'all.
What is it, a solicitor? That's as far as
Pro-
submitted,
they're
filing
gonna-
a nuisance.
They're gonna prosecute the case.
So it's filing a nuisance.
And that might be a way to become more educated
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, if you can do that, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
How common of an issue is it, Mr. Bentley? I mean, is it like going on all the time?
I think this time of the year is no, but it's like
Summer.
summertime, I would say 8 months out the year, but they haven't, I don't think they own that property for a year because like, I'm keep going back to, I was on that present sit on that property. And this only came about, I would say last May or
Yeah,
June.
it looks like it sold last March.
Who owned it?
Mr. Fred Pitts owned it, and he sold it to Corey Dawson last March. I mean, from what's on the Q Public, I mean, Mr. Pitts has owned it since the 1996.
It was sold in March.
He sold it last March, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
and that's when, it was, April, May is when it started. And then you might have warm days during the winter months, then it go again. So it's an ongoing thing, but it's not an everyday thing until summer. When the summer is wild, it's every day. Sundays, weekends, 3-4 days out the week.
All right, let me put my thinking cap back on.
But Russell, that might be a way to have the solicitor come and
Yeah.
inform us. It might be a way to begin to understand it better. Because it is a tricky situation.
Good questions. Y'all got anything else?
No, just to say that we appreciate you. We think you're doing a great job. With all of you.
We need a motion to come out, I guess. Second. All right. Thank y'all for coming. We appreciate it.
Hey guys, if you didn't, please could sign this this little town hall.
Mr. Bentley.
Right here.
We didn't intend it.
We just take it in.
We just wouldn't, deal with it, wouldn't.
Yeah, we would put it in. We just, we hadn't put it in there yet. We just decided not to put it in there yet. That way we can add it in later. Are you?
Yes, ma'am.
Over here on the residents are well pleased with the street.
Yeah.
Folks are complaining that now when they went back after the paving, there was tar. They put the tar and dirt and mud under people's yards.
He's fussing too.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, we're cleaning it up. We got issues.
Okay.